What if you could master one skill that could make a significant change and improve every aspect of your life? Your career, your relationships, your confidence. What would that one skill be?
What are the things you spend money on? What are the things you spend time on? What are the things you spend energy on? Now, you cannot manage what you cannot measure.
Most people think that success is linked to knowledge, hard work, experience. But the real answer? It's about communication.
Be real with yourself. When we speak about this communication and we're talking about inner dialogue, my self-talk, to be real and candid about where I'm at.
You're listening to Intentionality with Paul Kemp.
Today, in this third episode in this series of IWPK built around our reading challenge, we are going to be exploring how this one skill can completely change your life and help you to finally move forward. And to help me unpack this truth, this one skill, I welcome back Tertius.
Thanks, Paul. It's great being back. I must say I'm enjoying this reading challenge tremendously. And I really want to encourage everyone to please get onto the platform and start talking to us. We're available on the platform, but I'm loving this. Thank you for this opportunity.
And while we're on the point, thank you to everybody that has already joined, that are already making comments on the platform. Those of you that haven't joined yet, it's not too late. Come and join this challenge. You can catch up on all the reading that we've already done. But most importantly, you can start reading the 7 books that we have chosen on life. So Tertius, today we're here to talk about life. Now, I have framed the intro to this episode around the skill of communication. Now, I want to go out on a limb here and say that I think both of us are reasonably good communicators. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no.
Tell me why.
Depends on who you ask. I think when it comes to certain type of relationships, we might be good communicators, but in others, I think sometimes I should listen more, because I think that's the one thing that people don't understand of communication. Because I know a lot of people, when you said the word communication, immediately their minds went to how to speak, how to communicate. But they don't realize there's a few nuances and dimensions to this. The one is how to listen, very important. And the other one is communicating my inner dialogue, my self-talk. Now, I've got a lot to say about that. And I think that's very important to understand when it comes to communication. So I totally agree. But our definition of communication, maybe we should broaden it a little bit more.
You see, that's why I wanted you to be part of this conversation that we're having around this reading challenge, around these concepts we're unpacking on mind, money, and life. I do want to say that I think, well, at the very least, we are above average communicators. And the reason I say that is I want to get to why. Why do you believe you're a good communicator?
I think my mom used to say, I've got big ears. Those of you listening, go check out the YouTube podcast. Well, I think one of the things a skill that I've developed over time is to listen, to ask questions and to listen to people. My master's degree, postgraduate, I did research in leadership. And one of the skills that I picked up, the common denominators when it came to good leaders in government, in business, in NGOs, NPOs, was leaders listen. They've got the ability to really listen and dig down and understand what the core problem is. So I think that's one of the things I'll say, well, hopefully, the reasons those who listen well can communicate well. Paul, why do you think you're above average communicator?
To me, it's all about storytelling. And I think there's a skill to storytelling. You become a better communicator when you become a better storyteller. And I don't understand how people think they can become better communicators, better storytellers, if they're not reading stories. To me, there's a clear distinction between people that are readers and also good communicators, and people that struggle with good communication, but they don't actually read. And I really wanted to make that point, the link between being a good communicator and reading.
You know, remind me of a quote Plato said, "Those who tell the best stories rule the world." So telling stories, being a good narrator, orator is very, very important. So you remind me about something that I experienced in life. Someone told me this, and I read this in a book. Sometimes we have this disconnect between the narrative self and the experiential self. So
What does that mean?
narrative story, I've got the story I tell in my head. And then I've got what I experience on a daily basis. And the further there is a disconnect, a distance between the two, the more tension I create in myself. When we talk about life, today is about life.
Yes.
So just give you a practical example. I'll tell myself a story of how I physically want to, be more in shape or healthier, or, then I'll tell myself a story of how it's going to be. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And that's where vision comes in, dreams comes in. I get inspired by other people and watch films and documentaries and, spend time with the right friends or whatever the case may be. And suddenly I'm telling myself a story, my narrative self of, Dashies, you're going to go to the gym and you're going to practice and you're going to be a longevity expert, whatever the case may be. So that's the story. And on my narrative self, there's an action. I go to the gym and I take out a contract, a very expensive contract with the gym. That's my narrative self. Tomorrow morning at 4:00 when the alarm goes off, then I have to negotiate not with my experiential self. I didn't sleep well. I've got a lot of tension at work. There's a lot of things, life happens. Now I don't go to the gym. But my narrative self, I made a decision, a choice. And we'll get back to choices a bit later on. Now, the distance between what I experience and the story I'm telling myself, the more tension and disappointment I experience. That's very, very important. I need both of these. A reality check and the one that helps me dream. But it's very important to understand the two when it comes to life. So you reminded me about this experience I've had.
But there's an important point here. I think that if there's a big enough divide, or let's call it a big enough disconnection between the narrative self and the experiential self, I think that's where your problems start. That's where things like disappointment start, disappointment in yourself, which I think rolls over into things like lack of confidence, lack of self-belief, lack of self-esteem. I think it's something that we need to be very careful of in our lives, is this disconnection that happens between the narrative self and the experiential self.
You see, but now that's a cool thing about reading and other people that went through similar experiences. And we start reading book by The Power of Habit or Atomic Habits, because now I can make a choice. I am disappointed. I feel that disappointment in myself. And I shouldn't allow this disappointment that it defines my identity. I failed and therefore I'm a failure. No, I made a decision. I failed at certain things, but I can, with that same energy and same mental capacity, I can make a choice to start forming new habits so that I can bring closer this narrative and experiential self to one another and, taste success. It's one of the good things when you achieve goals, when I've got habit shaping goals, and systems in place, and I can feel it. It in itself becomes a feedback loop that reinforces life.
And I think the trick here is the following, and this is something we touched on in the first episode in the series that we are building around this reading challenge, when we spoke about your mind and your mindset. You're speaking about choices and decisions. You're speaking about better habits. But I think everything starts with making a choice about changing your thought patterns, and how all of these things are connected. I think that's the most important thing I want to get to, is the connectedness of everything that I spoke about, that circle, which is either a circle that's taking you into the light or a circle that's taking you into the dark. But you have a choice of where that circle starts, the mindset it starts with, the choices you make, the habits you have, the routines you have. Are those ones that are going to serve you, or is it going to detract from the success you have in life? And I think the important point I'm just trying to make here is we've both experienced how anywhere in your life, it doesn't matter where you are, how old you are, you can start making better choices, make better decisions, have better habits and routines that will give you a better outcome in your life.
I think that's why we're very intentional in choosing the top books when it comes to life. One is Kim Scott, Radical Candor. To really be candid and like be real with yourself. When we speak about this communication and we're talking about inner dialogue, my self-talk, to be real and candid about where I'm at. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I've disappointed myself and people. But yes, give yourself a mission. I can change that. I can change. I can bring value. I can change. Daniel H. Pink, the book Drive, what drives the purpose to find that purpose, that autonomy to go and to be vulnerable. Brené Brown, one of the books that we're going to do, to be vulnerable, not to be afraid to put yourself out and say, this is my story. Vulnerability and candor and finding purpose and drive in that.
The book Radical Candor made me think again of an episode I did recently. I think you've listened to it, the episode that I spoke about Donald Trump. Now, remember what was behind the scenes of that episode was not necessarily having a conversation about Trump. He was just an example. It was more around, being kind. And when I think about the book Radical Candor, the concept that comes up in my mind is being honest without being a jerk. Being able to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody where you might point out something that somebody doesn't like, but you do it in such a way that you don't come across as an unkind person. That is also a choice in how you pitch up in those conversations.
I think in one of the other books, Winning the War in Your Mind, it's you constantly wake up every morning, and I've got a tendency to overthink sometimes. And maybe I should re-script, rewrite, reshape, and reform, the narrative and the story, so that in my communication, it's saturated with this narrative, this story. Yes, it is possible. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I can change. Yes, it can be better. No to this, no to that, so it can be a yes for something that is of better value, conducive to much better living.
Actually, speaking of change, I think this is something that a lot of people fear. It's change, and I think it's an important thing to try and learn how to embrace change and not fear it. It makes me think of the book The Power to Change by Craig Groeschel, how he talks about fear being the biggest roadblock to our success, but how we must shift our mindset from this fear to something that can help us in creating a lasting transformation in our lives by making the choice to actually embrace those changes that are necessary in our life to be successful.
All of us, we have a resistance to change. And if you haven't experienced it, you will experience it somewhere in your life. You're going to resist it, or there might be a fear to change. But we need to face this fear. That's part of life. We're doing an episode on life. Life is meant to be lived, tasting many of the dimensions and the full spectrum of what life has to offer. So when you encounter fear, think about it. This is part of my story. This is part of the journey. But the way I deal with this, we're going to determine the outcome. And, a lot of people say, life is short. No, it's actually the longest thing you'll ever do in your life.
Yeah, very true.
And the cool thing is we get to do things over. And I've seen it, that we do get second chances.
One of the things I really want to touch on in terms of this whole thing around fear and embracing change and being comfortable with change in your life is something I've started doing the last few years of my life is trying to get myself out of my comfort zone. I'm a person that loves routine. I love doing things that I like over and over again. But I've found that there's a big risk around contentment. Complacency, that's a better word. There's a big risk around complacency when you keep on doing something that's in your comfort zone. So something I've been trying is trying to do something on a regular basis that's outside of my comfort zone, that challenges me. And this podcast is an example of this. You and I were talking about this. There are incredibly wonderful aspects to this podcast, things that I enjoy enormously, knowing that sometimes you've said something that has a positive impact on somebody's life. But there's also a huge amount of uncomfortability around this, having to do things that puts you under tremendous pressure, deadlines that you have to meet, juggling work and the podcast and relationships you have in your life. But I think it is so important that we keep on challenging ourselves to get out of this comfort zone, to make the choice of actually getting out of this comfort zone, to be able to, I think, achieve success, live a better life.
Well, you remind me of something I read, and I think we've spoken about this a year or two ago. When I read books, I think it's important for us when we read books not to think like cooks, but more like chefs. A cook works according to a recipe. You do A, B, C, D to equal whatever the case may be. A chef is someone that knows the ingredients. Yes, the recipe is there and the principles is there. But a chef is someone that can deconstruct, think on first principles, and give you nuances, new flavor. It can do the recipe, the chef can do the recipe as well. But life is better experienced through having a chef mentality and not just a cook. Sometimes you have to be a cook. Just follow this recipe. There are certain things that has to work like this. But I think we are too much we think too much like cooks. And when we can experience life more like chefs, it's like, it's not just about filling the gap. It's not just filling my tummy. It's not just about cooking a meal so that I can eat it so I can feel full. There's so much more to food and the art of making food and experiencing more flavors and more dimension that extrapolates more so that life becomes so much more rich and dimensional to me.
But to get there, you need to get out of the comfort zone of following a recipe.
It's daunting. Because what do I do outside of this recipe, outside of this formula? So when I read books, I read of people that kind of, this is the formula and the principles that work for them, but it's not a copy and paste methodology. This is like, now go live your story. Here's some formulas and recipes, but go live it.
I love it. I still think there might be some listeners out there that still feel stuck, that are still not 100% certain where to start in changing their situation, their life, becoming more intentional. We've spoken about choices, making better choices, making better decisions. But I want to just quickly explore the role that habits can play in helping you to get past this barrier you might have, this feeling of being stuck in a place. Would you agree with me that your habits can sometimes keep you where you are, good or bad? And that changing those habits is sometimes a small little thing that you start changing that could, again, lead to a lot of other things that changes and gets better in your life. I mean, one of the books that we are going to read as part of this challenge is Atomic Habits, written by James Clear. I think a lot of people out there would have read this book already. If you haven't, this is a great chance to experience this book through this reading challenge. But what role do you think habits can play in helping you change, in helping you get unstuck in your life?
I think, first of all, it also acts as a mirror. By just journaling or being cognizant, aware of the small little things I do every day to create big change, it actually reflects a lot about who I am. If I start tracking these habits, being very aware of what I do with my time, my money, my resources, it actually tells a lot about who I am. So for me, that's the first, and that ties back to your circle in terms of relates, it's connected to your story. If it doesn't help, I tell the story of who I think or I should be, and I look at my habits of who I really am, my experiential self. So I think habits is one of those beautiful things. It's a mirror. It reflects back onto, and then I can say, oh, this is the reality. This is the candor in the candid conversation. This is the vulnerability that's being raw and naked and exposed, and then say, but okay, I'm going to make a choice. This is who I want to be. And then tracking, having a system in place to bring about change.
No, I like that. Now, let's say not even that is enough. There's another thing you can do to get unstuck. And it's for some reason something that I see a lot of people not being prepared to do, and I'm not really sure why, but it's asking for help. I think a lot of people are hesitant to ask for help. And something we've read in the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, which is again one of the books on our reading list for this reading challenge, is that the most successful people don't try and do things alone. There's a huge power in trust and collaboration.
There's a little bumper sticker saying that says teamwork makes the dream
Absolutely
work, and it still holds true.
And I think the important thing for me from a practical takeaway point of view in terms of changing your life, making better choices, is find a mentor, find a coach, find an accountability partner. It could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague at work. Find somebody that can help you on this journey towards success, this journey towards achieving the things that you want to achieve in your life.
One of the other good books that we've read, Paul, is Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy. I think one of the other big things is, we should check our ego at the door,
Absolutely. No, I fully agree with that. That's just time flies when you're having fun. I can't believe we've reached the end of this episode. It really has been an amazing and inspiring journey with you. Is there maybe some call to action that you want to leave our viewers and listeners with?
Yes, there is. This is going to be an interesting call to action. I want you to go write a few things down. What are the things you spend money on? What are the things you spend time on? What are the things you spend energy on? Now, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So money, what do you spend money on? What do you spend time on? And what do you spend energy on? Just as a reflection. And I'll ask you, be brutally honest with yourself. You can do this little exercise by yourself. But this is very, very important. And ask yourself, is this who I am? Or is this who I really want to be?
Can they be the same things? Time? What was it? Time, money, and energy. Can it be the same things? Does it have to be different things, this list? Because I want to go and try this.
So you will definitely see. I mean, you put it on an Excel spreadsheet. So you'll be able to see if I spend money on certain things, why do I spend money on, why do I repeat spending money on these things? Or the fact that I cannot even track that in itself should say, I don't value money because I don't know where my money is going. Or energy. If I know what energizes me or takes energy, or what do I spend energy on? That's going to be a difficult. I think personally, as you need to budget your money, you should budget your energy as well and manage that. And then time is very easy.
Great. Love that. My call to action to the viewers and listeners is around communication. Remember, communication is a superpower. And if you want to level up on that superpower, join this reading challenge. It's not too late yet. We're in week 3. We've got 7 books around life that we are reading this week. We've done the 7 books on money. We've done the 7 books on mind. You can read all of those summaries that we've already covered. So please go and join this challenge. Dashes, that's it for this week. We usually end off with a tip of the week. I'm not going to do a tip of the week simply because there's so many tips of the week in these books that we are going to be reading. And that just leaves me with saying thank you, Tashius. This has been a wonderful journey, these last 3 episodes. I really appreciate you being here, appreciate your insights and the value that you've brought to this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Paul. I enjoyed this journey and I'm looking forward to even, go forward with the platform and seeing people's comments on the platform. So keep on reading, keep on learning, and just be a student of life. Keep on living.
Great. Thanks for listening and stay intentional.
Thanks for watching Intentionality with Paul Kempf. Subscribe, like, and click that bell to get notified when we release more episodes on how to live a life of intention and purpose.